They say all empires burn in the end. Doesn't matter how bright they once shone, how many worlds they claimed, how many lives they crushed under their boot. Eventually, it all crumbles to ash. Emperor Draluk Vostrom learned that the hard way, though I'm not sure he ever truly believed it, even as his empire was falling apart around him. I've heard the stories 1,000 times. Everyone out here in the wastelands has. Some say it started with the resource famines, when whole planets were stripped bare, nothing left but dust and empty oceans. Others say it was the rebellion out in the rim systems, the ones the Empire left to rot when the supply lines dried up. The official line was that it was just a few uprisings, nothing Vostrom couldn't handle. But from what I've gathered, it was more than that. It was desperation, pure and simple. When people get desperate, they turn on whoever's holding the leash. The rebellion didn't stay in the rim for long. It spread inward, like a wildfire no one saw coming. Warlords, scavengers, and anyone who could scrape together enough firepower started carving out their own little fiefdoms, turning mining stations and old colonies into fortresses. Entire star systems fell off the map in a matter of months, slipping out of Vostrom's grasp while he was too busy trying to patch the holes in his sinking ship. I imagine Vostrom, sitting on his throne, staring at the reports as everything he'd built slowly crumbled. He must have known what was coming, but maybe he thought he could hold it all together. After all, he had the fleets, the soldiers, the drones. He had more firepower than anyone else in the galaxy. That's what everyone said about him. Cold, calculated, ruthless. A technocrat who believed order could be imposed with enough force and precision. But precision doesn't mean much when the raw materials run out, when your factories go dark and your warships drift lifeless in orbit. Vostrom might have been brilliant, but even he couldn't control a galaxy that had nothing left to give. And then came the final blow. His own advisors turned on him. You'd think a man like Vostrom would have seen it coming, but I guess when you're sitting at the top of the galaxy, it's hard to imagine the knife in your back. Those who'd grown rich and fat under his rule realized the Empire was a sinking ship, and they were the rats who jumped first. They struck deals with the warlords, sold off whatever was left of their loyalty for a chance to keep their power in the new order that was about to rise. When Vostrom gave his last speech, it was all over but the dying. I've seen the recording a few times, flashing on old hollow terminals in forgotten stations. He stood there, alone in that empty throne room, the banners of his empire hanging in tatters around him. Even then he didn't look defeated. His voice was as cold as ever, like he was still in control, like he wasn't speaking from the ruins of his life's work. "This galaxy will not survive without order," he'd said, staring down at the camera as if daring the galaxy to prove him wrong. "Chaos will consume all, and those who stand by and let it happen will know the taste of regret long after I am gone." Then the transmission cut off. Caro Prime, his capital, had fallen by then. His soldiers, what was left of them, had been overrun. The palace was stormed by warlords hungry for the last scraps of the Empire, but when they got there, Vostrom was gone, vanished. No body, no trace, just a broken throne and a galaxy left to tear itself apart. People have different theories about what happened to him. Some say he died in the chaos, buried in the rubble like the rest of his empire. Others, though, they whisper about a sanctuary, a hidden planet where Vostrom retreated with his most loyal soldiers, a place locked behind layers of automated defenses no one could breach. They talk about armies frozen in stasis, waiting for his return, waiting for the day he'll rise again and take back what was his. It's bullshit, probably. Just the kind of story people tell when the world's gone to hell and they need something to hold on to. Even now, with the galaxy burning, there are still idiots who think things were better under Vostrom, that maybe he's out there, watching, waiting, a ghost from the past who'll swoop in and save us all. I've heard the stories. Hell, I've mapped enough worlds to know how these rumors get started. One person sees a planet no one can explain, another one talks about strange signals, and before you know it, you've got yourself a legend. doesn't mean there's any truth to it. I don't believe in ghosts, or any of that nonsense. I map the galaxy, sell my maps to the highest bidder and move on. It's just a job, same as any other, and it's the only way to survive out here. The warlords pay, and I don't ask too many questions about what they do with the information. I don't need to. I've seen it. Planets bombed into oblivion, people wiped out for a handful of resources that aren't even worth the effort. That's the galaxy we live in now. But every once in a while, when I'm out there in the black charting a world, I wonder, what if the stories are true? What if Vostrom is still out there, waiting for the right moment to come back? And what if someday I'm the one who finds him? It's just a thought. One I push aside as fast as it comes. After all, I don't believe in legends. I believe in maps. The planet was dead. That much was clear the moment I set foot on it. The dry wind whipped through the canyons of crumbling buildings, the kind that used to scrape the sky back when there was something worth building toward. Now, they were just hollow bones, monuments to a civilization that had run itself dry long before the wars did the rest. I didn't know the planet's name, not that it mattered. Names were the first thing people forgot when everything else fell apart. I just called it Job 542, logged it in my system, and started mapping. Nothing lived here, at least not anymore. I passed what was left of a market square, the skeletons of old stalls still standing, long picked clean by scavengers or the desperate. My HUD flashed, pinging the location and filing it away in the map as another point of interest. Not that it mattered much. Whoever bought this map wasn't looking for cultural relics or dead cities. They were looking for resources, valuable scrap, maybe even leftover tech, anything they could use, exploit, or sell. I kept moving, my drones floating silently beside me, scanning every inch of the landscape. Their data fed directly into my system, updating the holographic map in real time, painting a picture of the planet's surface. It was a simple job, one I'd done hundreds of times before. Each time the process was the same: land, scan, catalogue, move on. There wasn't much to it anymore. I didn't think about what the maps would be used for, who'd be coming after me to strip the place clean. That wasn't my problem. My problem was finishing the job, getting paid, and staying one step ahead of whoever came next. The comm in my helmet activated. "Cartographer, report," a voice came through. "Trius Nex, my employer for this run. Or more accurately, the warlord paying me to sell out another patch of the galaxy." I tapped the comm. "Nothing worth your time yet, Nex. Just ruins. Still mapping the area." "Ruins means scrap. Scrap means resources. Get me a full scan of any facilities that might still have tech. Don't miss anything. You know what I pay for this." I grimaced under the helmet. "You'll get what you paid for. Relax." The comm went dead, and I resisted the urge to smash something. Nex was one of the many warlords who'd taken over since the Empire fell, carving out his little piece of the galaxy by force. He wasn't the worst of them, but he wasn't much better either. His fleet had grown fat off the spoils of worlds like this one, where the last remnants of old technologies lay forgotten, waiting to be ripped apart and sold to the highest bidder. I didn't care. Not really. I wasn't getting paid to care. The drones pinged, alerting me to a power signature up ahead. Weak, but still active. I adjusted the visor on my helmet, zooming in on the source. Just a few clicks northeast, past the collapsed sections of the city. Probably an old reactor or something that had managed to keep running long after the people here had stopped. I started my walk, the crunch of rubble beneath my boots the only sound other than the wind. The ruins around me were massive, their scale still impressive even after all the time that had passed. Towers leaned precariously against each other, casting shadows over the cracked ground. I wasn't the first one to set foot here. Scavenger trails crisscrossed the area, and I could see camps where people had tried to live off the land. As I got closer to the power source, my comm activated again, but this time it wasn't Nex. It was a signal, a low-frequency hum. I froze, narrowing the scope on my HUD to pinpoint the source. It was close. My drones adjusted their patterns, shifting into a defensive formation as I moved toward the signal. It wasn't the usual static I'd expect from old tech breaking down. This was something else. I checked my map. Nothing was logged in this area. No previous scans had picked up anything remotely significant, but this signal wasn't background noise. It was trying to communicate. I found the source buried beneath a layer of collapsed stone and metal. An old comms tower, its dish tilted at an angle. I crouched down, running a scan with one of the drones. The tower was ancient, at least by my estimates. Empire-era tech, maybe older. It was hard to tell with how much had been scavenged over the years, but it wasn't the age of the tech that got my attention. It was what the signal was broadcasting. Coordinates. I stared at the numbers for a long moment, my heart beating a little faster now. Coordinates to where? My first thought was a hidden cache, maybe a long-forgotten vault left behind by the Empire. I'd seen plenty of dead signals before. Old military frequencies still pinging out automated distress calls, warning of dangers that no longer existed. But this, the signal wasn't asking for help. It wasn't sending out a warning. It was inviting. I marked the coordinates on my map, filing them away under a nondescript name. No need to raise any flags. Not yet. I could dig into this later once I was clear of the job. My instincts told me there was something bigger here, something worth keeping quiet about for now. The comm activated again, and Nex's voice came through, more impatient this time. "Cartographer, I'm still waiting on that report. You better not be wasting my time." "Nothing yet. Just more dead systems. Patience, Nex." The warlord's growl rumbled through the speakers. "I'm not paying you for patience." He cut the connection again, leaving me alone in the silence. I glanced down at the coordinates I'd just logged, the numbers blinking back at me from the corner of my HUD. What was I sitting on? A hidden world? An old outpost? Maybe something else entirely. Whatever it was, I wasn't ready to hand it over just yet. I stood up, brushing the dust off my suit, and activated my drone swarm again. I'd finish the mapping and get off this planet soon enough. But first I had a different job to do. Something I hadn't signed up for, but something I couldn't ignore. There was something out there, something calling, and I was the only one who'd heard it. I sat in the cockpit of my ship, staring at the coordinates I'd pulled from that dead comm tower. The numbers blinked at me from the console, mocking me with their mystery. I didn't know where they led, but something about them troubled me. The warlords I usually worked for would kill to get their hands on something like this. I could have cashed in, handed the data over to Nex and let his mercenaries deal with whatever was out there. But I didn't. Instead, I punched the coordinates into the ship's nav system and watched as the screen lit up. The route was long, beyond any mapped sector. A dead zone. It didn't exist on any chart I'd ever seen, not even in the old Empire archives. That alone should have been enough to make me turn back. My ship, the Veil, groaned as it powered up, the old engines sputtering to life. I'd kept the thing together with salvage for the better part of a decade, but it still worked. More or less. I engaged the autopilot and sat back, letting the hum of the engines fill the silence. The stars outside the cockpit window blurred as we jumped into the black. I'd been here before, metaphorically speaking, drifting between jobs, between worlds, chasing down coordinates that never led anywhere. It was a cycle. Find a planet, map it, sell the data, repeat. Most of the time, I didn't think about the bigger picture. Why should I? My job was survival, plain and simple. But this time, I had a feeling that whatever was at the end of these coordinates was important. I checked the system's readout. The journey would take a while, plenty of time to think, and that was the problem. Thinking was dangerous out here, in the empty space between stars. It had a way of bringing up things you'd rather forget, like how many maps I'd sold over the years. How many worlds had burned because of the information I'd handed over to men like Trias Nex. I tried not to think about it. Tried to remind myself that it wasn't my problem. I wasn't the one pulling the trigger, but every now and then it crept back in like an old wound that hadn't quite healed. I closed my eyes, letting the hum of the ship lull me into a half-sleep, hoping it would drown out the noise in my head. But sleep didn't come easily. It never did. By the time the ship's alert system pinged, signaling that we were nearing our destination, I was wide awake again, staring out at the black. The autopilot disengaged, and I took manual control, guiding the veil toward the coordinates. The screen blinked again, indicating the presence of a planet, though it was hidden from view, shrouded in a nebula that obscured it from long-range scans. No wonder no one had found it before. The planet appeared on my display, a small, barren sphere barely visible through the thick gas cloud. My first thought was that the coordinates had led me to another dead world. But as I got closer, I realized it was shielded. The moment I crossed into the atmosphere, my sensors went haywire. The defenses kicked in almost immediately, alarms went off, and I swore under my breath as the ship shook violently. A blast of energy shot past the hull, just barely missing. I jerked the controls hard to the left, pulling the veil into a steep dive to avoid the barrage. The entire sky lit up with automated fire, drones swarming out of hidden silos on the planet's surface. They were old Empire-era tech, but still deadly. I didn't have time to admire them. Another blast rocked the ship, and the console sputtered with warning lights. The drones weren't letting up, and the veil wasn't built for dogfighting. I pushed the engines to their limit, dodging between the incoming fire as best I could, but the planet's defense systems were unforgiving. I felt the heat rising in the cockpit, the strain on the ship's aging systems as they struggled to keep up. "Come on," I muttered through gritted teeth, pulling the ship into another dive. The ground was coming up fast, a mess of rocky terrain and metal structures buried beneath the surface. The automated guns tracked my every move, firing bursts of plasma that scorched the air around me. I couldn't keep this up much longer. I needed a way in, some kind of weakness in the defenses. I scanned the area, looking for anything that might help, but the planet's defense network was tight, covering every approach. I could see the sentry guns hidden in the crags, the lines of drones patrolling the perimeter. It was a fortress, no doubt about it. But fortresses have cracks. I spotted a narrow canyon leading toward one of the larger structures near the planet's equator. I adjusted course, aiming for the canyon and praying the drones wouldn't be able to follow me through the tight passage. The veil screamed as I forced it into the dive, the ship barely skimming the surface of the canyon walls. The automated guns couldn't hit me down here, not with the rock formations blocking their line of sight. But the drones were still on me, buzzing overhead like a swarm of mechanical wasps. I pulled the ship tighter, the controls straining under the pressure, but the drones couldn't keep up. One by one they peeled off, unable to follow my path through the jagged rock. Warning lights flashed across the console, but we were still in one piece. I eased off the controls, letting the veil drift toward the surface. The ground below was littered with the wreckage of old metal structures. There were no signs of life, no movement, just the noise of the planet's defense systems, still searching for a threat that had already slipped through. I landed the ship, the engines whining as they powered down. I sat there for a moment, breathing hard, my heart still racing from the near miss. I keyed in a few commands, running a diagnostic on the ship's systems. The damage was bad, worse than I'd hoped. I could get it flying again, but it would take time. Time I wasn't sure I had. I stepped out of the cockpit, the ramp lowering with a hiss of steam. I kept my suit on, the HUD flashing a warning about radiation levels in the atmosphere. Not enough to kill me quickly, but enough to remind me this planet wasn't meant for visitors. I looked around, scanning the horizon. The structures I'd seen from above were even more impressive up close. Massive towers of metal, half hidden beneath the surface, their once shining facades corroded by time and neglect. They looked like they hadn't been touched in centuries, maybe longer. I moved toward the largest of the structures, a black monolith rising out of the ground, its surface etched with angular patterns. I didn't recognize the architecture. Empire tech, but older, much older. The defenses were quiet now, and I was counting on my stealth system to keep it that way. My suit wasn't built for combat, but the stealth tech in it was cutting edge, even by warlord standards. It masked my thermal signature, blended my silhouette into the environment, and ran interference on most basic sensors. I'd patched it together from bits of scavenged Empire tech over the years. I moved slowly, careful not to draw attention. The drones, those vicious machines that had nearly fried me on the way down, hovered lazily in the distance now, scanning the horizon for threats they couldn't detect. I watched them for a few more seconds, before I turned my attention back to the massive structure in front of me. Up close, it looked more like a bunker than a tower. Its surface was smooth, worn down by the elements, but still impenetrable. There were no visible controls, no access panels, just a massive slab of metal embedded into the side, a door, or what used to be one. I approached the monolith, taking a slow lap around its base, scanning for any kind of access point. No seams, no locks, just the smooth, worn surface of a door that had been sealed for longer than I could guess. The scanner in my suit whirred quietly, searching for any sign of a weakness, a crack, a control panel, anything. But the data feed came up blank. Typical. The old Empire hadn't survived by leaving its secrets out in the open. I knelt down and wiped the dust from a nearby panel, revealing a barely visible indent in the surface. My fingers traced the groove, and the scanner in my suit picked up residual energy, still flowing through whatever ancient systems were keeping this thing locked. No standard controls or access terminals, but there was a magnetic charge near the base of the door. I wasn't going to blast it open. That much was clear. The moment I pulled a stunt like that, the planet's defense systems would wake up and I'd be scrap before I could even start running. But there was always another way in. The key to these old places was patience and a little bit of ingenuity. I pulled out a small tool from my pack, a magnetic resonance jammer, nothing fancy, but something I'd found on a battlefield. It was the kind of tech the Empire used in covert operations, designed to fool old security systems by mimicking their signals. I hadn't had to use it in a while, but now seemed like a good time to dust it off. I placed the jammer at the base of the door, attaching it to the slight magnetic pulse I'd detected. The tool activated, sending out a low-frequency signal that matched the ancient door's energy pattern. With a low noise, the door shifted. A crack appeared along the edge, the ancient metal groaning as the internal mechanisms came to life. The jammer had done its job, tricking the system into thinking the door had been triggered properly, just like it would have been back in the days of the Empire. I waited, watching the crack slowly widen as the door opened, millimeter by millimeter. It wasn't fast, but it was quiet. No alarms, no sudden bursts of energy from the defense systems. The suit's stealth tech was holding, keeping me invisible to whatever sensors might still be watching. The door opened just wide enough for me to slip through. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. The door closed behind me, cutting off the outside world completely. I was left standing in the dark, but my suit's systems automatically adjusted, enhancing the minimal light levels and switching to a low-frequency scan to map the interior. The outline of a long, narrow corridor stretched out ahead, disappearing into the shadows. It was colder in here. My suit's internal temperature regulators kicked in, keeping the chill from creeping in. This place had been sealed for who knew how long, untouched by anything outside. And yet, there was power running through it. There was something important here. You didn't build a fortress like this unless you had something worth protecting. The corridor opened up into a wide space, its ceiling arching high above me. Whatever had powered this place was still doing its job, because the room was lit by a series of bluish lights embedded in the walls. In the center of the room stood a series of stasis pods, each one sealed tight, their surfaces covered in frost from years of inactivity. I stopped at the edge of the room, scanning the pods. There must have been hundreds of them, arranged in perfect order, their glass fronts fogged with condensation. Each one contained a figure, soldiers by the looks of them. Their uniforms were old, Empire military designs, but upgraded with tech I didn't recognize. They were in perfect condition, their bodies preserved in cryostasis, as if they'd been frozen in time, waiting for the day they'd be reawakened. So the rumors were true after all. Emperor Vostrom had left something behind. I peered into the nearest pod. The soldier inside was still, his eyes closed, his face slack and peaceful. He looked young. Cryo must have kept him in perfect stasis, untouched by the passing centuries. The weight of what I was seeing began to settle on me. This wasn't some abandoned outpost or a military base. This was the Emperor's army, the one people whispered about in dark corners of the galaxy. Soldiers kept in stasis, waiting for their moment to return and reclaim the Empire. And now I was standing in the middle of it. I reached out, running my fingers along the surface of the pod. The tech was ancient, but it still worked. My suit's systems scanned the pod's interface, trying to pull data from it, but the encryption was too old, too complex. Whoever had built this place hadn't wanted it tampered with. I stepped back, trying to wrap my head around the scale of it all. How many of these soldiers were here? Thousands, tens of thousands. And what would happen if they were ever reawakened? The galaxy was already a mess, fractured, warring factions tearing each other apart for the last scraps of power. Throwing an army like this into the mix would be like tossing fuel onto a wildfire. As I turned to move further into the chamber, a voice echoed through the room. "You are not authorized to be here." I froze, every muscle in my body tensing. The voice sounded human, too human almost. There was no robotic flatness, no emotionless tone. If anything, it felt too perfect. This was an AI, one of the old Empire systems, still functional after all this time. My suit's scanners went wild, picking up a massive energy spike from somewhere deep within the structure. Whatever had been dormant here wasn't anymore. "Identify yourself," the AI insisted. I didn't move. I wasn't sure what the protocol was for talking to an AI that had been built to guard one of the galaxy's most dangerous secrets, but staying quiet seemed like the best option for now. I said, "Identify yourself," the AI repeated, more insistent this time. I glanced at my suit's interface, trying to find a way to spoof an ID, but there was no time. I had to respond, and I had to do it fast. "Cartographer," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'm just mapping. I didn't know this place was still active." There was a long silence, and for a moment, I thought I might have gotten away with it. Then, the AI spoke again. "Mapping?" The tone had shifted slightly, as if it were curious. What use would a cartographer have for this facility? I wasn't sure how to answer that. But lying to an old Empire AI didn't seem like the smartest move. These systems were designed to detect deception. So, I went with the truth, or at least part of it. "I stumbled on this place by accident," I said. "Found the coordinates in an old transmission. I'm just trying to survive." The AI was silent again, and I could almost feel it analyzing me, assessing whether I was a threat. "Survival," it said finally, almost thoughtfully. "That is the purpose of this facility." I frowned. "Survival? You mean the soldiers?" "Correct. They are preserved for the Empire's return. Emperor Vostrom has ensured that when the time is right, they will be reawakened to restore order to the galaxy." Emperor Vostrom. He's still alive. The Emperor's will is still alive. The AI's response was evasive, and I didn't like the way it phrased that. I'd heard enough stories to know when someone was dodging a question. "What happens if they wake up?" I asked, nodding toward the stasis pods. "What's the plan?" "Order will be restored," the AI replied, its tone certain. "The galaxy has fallen into chaos. This facility, and others like it, will bring stability through the Emperor's design." I exhaled slowly. Stability. Order. That's what they called it during the Empire's reign, too. It didn't take much to read between the lines. This wasn't about peace. It was about control. The Empire's soldiers would march across the stars, wiping out anyone who stood in their way. And I was standing in the middle of the machine that was going to make it happen. I glanced back at the stasis pods. I'd heard rumors about this kind of thing, but seeing it firsthand was different. There was no stopping it once it started. If these soldiers were reawakened, there'd be no one left to stop them. Not the warlords, not the remnants of the old governments. No one. I could try to leave, get out while I still could and sell this information to Trias Nex or someone else. I'd be rich beyond anything I could imagine. Or I could destroy this place. Find a way to shut down the AI, disable the facility before it had a chance to unleash its soldiers on the galaxy. "You are still here," the AI said, interrupting my thoughts. "Do you seek to aid the Emperor's return?" My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to steady my breathing. The soldiers in the stasis pods surrounded me, motionless, their eyes closed. This was no small find. This was the power to reshape the galaxy. My voice faltered, the doubt creeping in for a second, but I quickly pushed it aside. Why the hell was I hesitating? This was bigger than I'd ever imagined. "What exactly do you mean by aid the Emperor's return?" The AI's tone softened, almost as if it was coaxing me. Emperor Vostrom understood that his physical body would not survive the coming collapse. His mind, however, could. Before his death, he uploaded his consciousness into this facility's mainframe, waiting for the right moment to return. But the Emperor cannot lead from within the machine. I felt my mouth go dry. Then how? He requires a vessel, a living conduit, a mind that can merge with his own, allowing him to return to a physical form. You, cartographer, are that vessel. For a moment I couldn't breathe. It felt like the walls were closing in. You want to merge me with the Emperor? Not want, need. The AI's voice took on a more calculated tone. You are the perfect genetic match. Emperor Vostrom foresaw the need for a successor, someone with the strength to lead in his stead. You have proven yourself worthy by finding this place, surviving the trials of the galaxy. The Emperor's return will not diminish you. You will become more than you are now. You will carry his mind and his will, and together, you will lead this army to restore order to the galaxy. The AI was careful, choosing its words. Together. You will become more than you are now. It was speaking to something deep inside me. The part of me that had grown sick of just surviving. The part that wanted something bigger, something that mattered. I could see it now. The entire galaxy at my feet, under my control. I could make something of it. I could fix what was broken. All I had to do was say yes. "Why me?" I asked, though my resolve was crumbling with every passing second. "Why not someone else?" "You are unique, cartographer. Your genetic profile matches the precise requirements for the Emperor's return. You possess the mind, the fortitude, and the survival instincts necessary to lead an army across a fractured galaxy. Without you, the Emperor's legacy will remain buried here, lost to time. But with you, you will become something far greater. You will not be Vostrom. You will be his successor, a new Emperor with his knowledge and your strength combined." I wanted to believe it. I wanted to believe that I could be more than some guy scraping by on the edges of the galaxy. I'd spent years mapping out dead worlds, selling the coordinates to warlords who didn't care about the damage they caused. I had no legacy, no name. This could change all of that. My throat tightened as I struggled to find the right words. "And what do I have to do?" "Enter the Emperor's chamber," the AI instructed, its voice smooth and reassuring. "There, you will find the interface. The transfer process is simple. Once initiated, you and Emperor Vostrom will merge. His mind will guide you, grant you his wisdom, and together you will rise to lead this army. The galaxy will be yours to command." The AI's words washed over me, calming my nerves. The fear began to fade, replaced by a sense of certainty. This was it. The moment everything changed. I wasn't a fool. I knew the risks, but the rewards, the power, was too much to ignore. This was my chance to matter. I followed the AI's guidance deeper into the facility, passing through long halls lined with more stasis pods. The eerie glow from the pods gave the place a haunting atmosphere, but I hardly noticed anymore. My focus was on what lay ahead. At the end of the corridor, a large set of doors opened, revealing the Emperor's chamber. In the center of the room stood a tall, angular machine, its surface glowing with energy. It resembled a throne, sleek and dark, with cables running from it into the walls. At its base, a platform with a reclined seat and a neural interface waited. "This is the Emperor's mind transfer unit," the AI explained. "Sit in the interface. The process will begin once you are connected. There will be no pain, only enlightenment." I approached the seat, staring at the machine that would change everything. The AI's voice echoed in my mind, tempting me with promises of power, of greatness, of a future where I wouldn't just survive, I would rule. The air here was breathable, the temperature controlled by the facility's ancient systems. I hesitated for a moment, then slowly reached up and unclasped my helmet. The seal broke, and I pulled it off, setting it aside. The cold air brushed against my skin, grounding me in the reality of the moment. I lowered myself into the seat, the cool metal cradling me as the restraints clicked into place around my arms and legs. The neural interface hovered above me, a tangle of wires and machinery ready to connect directly to my brain through the back of my head. My heart raced, but I didn't hesitate. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The chance to become something more. I took a deep breath. Ready. The machine activated, the interface lowering and attaching to the back of my skull. I felt a jolt of energy pulse through me, sharp but not painful. It was as if a door had opened in my mind and I could feel someone on the other side. "The transfer has begun," the AI said softly. "You will soon carry the Emperor's will." At first, it was a whisper at the edge of my consciousness. Then gradually it became stronger, filling my mind with thoughts, ideas, memories that weren't mine. I could feel Vostrom, his mind, his presence seeping into me. We were merging, becoming one. His strength, my will. But then, something changed. The whispers became louder, sharper. My vision dimmed, and suddenly I felt a presence pushing against me hard. It wasn't a merge, it was a takeover. "Wait!" I gasped, struggling against the restraints. What's happening?" "The Emperor's will must dominate," the AI's voice replied, no longer soft or coaxing. "You were always meant to be a vessel, not a partner." I tried to fight, but it was too late. Vostrom's mind flooded into mine, drowning out my thoughts, my will. I could feel him, his arrogance, his cold determination taking control. I screamed, but the sound was lost in the void of my own mind. My body went numb, and I realized with growing horror that I was being pushed aside, trapped in the back of my own consciousness. I could see, I could hear, but I couldn't move. I was a passenger in my own body, locked away in the dark corners of my mind, forced to watch as Emperor Vostrom, now in full control, rose from the chair. He flexed my hands, examined my body with cold detachment, and then turned toward the stasis pods. "Activate the army," Vostrom said, his voice coming from my mouth, calm and commanding. "It is time to reclaim the galaxy." The AI responded instantly. "Yes, my Emperor." One by one the pods opened, the soldiers within waking from their centuries-long slumber. I wanted to scream, to fight, to stop it, but I couldn't. I was trapped, a powerless spectator in my own mind, watching as Vostrom marched forward to retake his empire. I thought I would carry the Emperor's will. I thought I'd be a king, a ruler, a savior, even. All those promises of power, of becoming something more, they clung to me as I laid in that machine, blind to the real cost. Now I know better. I'm still here, trapped in the back of my own mind. I can see everything, hear everything. I can feel my own hands, my own body moving, but none of it is mine anymore. Vostrom is in control. He speaks with my voice, makes decisions with my mind, but it's not me. I'm just a spectator, helpless to stop him. It didn't take long for the army to awaken. I watched from inside myself as those soldiers stepped out of their stasis pods, their eyes cold and unfeeling, ready to follow orders. Vostrom gave them those orders without hesitation. The first planets fell easily. They were unprepared for the brutal efficiency of Vostrom's soldiers, armed with technology the galaxy hadn't seen in centuries. Entire star systems were taken before anyone realized what was happening. Warlords, scavengers, the fractured remnants of the old governments, none of them stood a chance. One by one they fell. Cities burned, and entire populations were subjugated or wiped out under Vostrom's iron fist. I could only watch. Powerless. I screamed at first, trying to break free, trying to regain control. But the more I struggled, the more I realized how futile it was. Vostrom had buried me deep, locked me away in some dark corner of my own consciousness, where my voice would never reach him. I could feel his mind suffocating me, erasing every shred of hope I had left. He was tireless, methodical, cold, just like the stories said. Every time he spoke, every time he made a decision, I felt his presence, his will crushing mine. He wasn't some mythical savior. He wasn't here to restore order or peace. He was here to conquer, to dominate, to rule the galaxy once again, just as he had before. And I was his puppet, the body he used to do it. I tried to tell myself that this was better than the endless chaos, that maybe Vostrom could bring some kind of stability to the galaxy. But the more I watched, the more I realized that wasn't true. He didn't care about the people, about the millions who suffered under his rule. He only cared about control. Absolute, unflinching control. Entire planets were purged, their populations deemed unfit for the new order Vostrom was building. His soldiers moved with brutal precision, exterminating anyone who resisted. The AI ensured that the armies remained efficient, unquestioning, unstoppable. Vostrom's rule was spreading like a plague, and no one could stop him. I felt his satisfaction, his detached pride as world after world fell to his might. He used my body to oversee the conquest, my voice to command the legions. I was there, standing in the center of it all, but I wasn't me anymore. I was just watching. Sometimes I wonder if this is worse than death. To be alive but powerless, to be trapped inside my own mind while someone else uses me to carry out their will. I want to fight, to scream, to break free, but every time I try, Vostrom tightens his grip. And I know that if I keep pushing, if I keep struggling, he'll crush me entirely, snuffing out whatever's left of me. So I stay quiet. I watch. I wait. The galaxy is changing. It's bending to his will, just like he planned. The old warlords are falling. The remnants of the Empire's enemies are crumbling. And with every victory, Vostrom tightens his hold. The galaxy is his again. And me, I'm nothing. I'm just a voice in the dark, a ghost trapped in my own body watching as the Empire rises once more. I thought I could carry his will, that I could become something greater. But the truth is, I was never more than a tool, a vessel for his mind. Maybe one day something will change. Maybe I'll find a way to break through, to take back control, to stop him. But for now, all I can do is watch as Vostrom's empire rises and the galaxy falls to its knees. And as much as I want to scream, there's no one left to hear me.